this episode, we are going to be taking a slight detour into a subject that can be sensitive for some people. Nonetheless, the dialogue is absolutely necessary. Let's call this Real Talk with Dr. Sandy. I do want to make a disclaimer up front. Please listen to this episode with an open mind. And keep in mind that the information in this podcast is intended for people who are already struggling with health issues and they want to learn the tools and scientifically based lifestyle changes that they need to make to get off the bumpy road of chronic brain fog and fatigue and onto the smooth and open paved highway of good health, good brain health, right? Clear thinking. If you're healthy, of course, there's still a ton of information you can learn about disease prevention from my content. But your steps may not need to be as drastic as someone who's already climbing that steep mountain. They're climbing Manitou incline because of chronic health issues, okay? That said, I also want you to take I'm talking to you healthy people. I want you to take inventory and remember that chronic symptoms are often a subtle shift in your normal. And I'm going to give you an idea of this from like going through an average life and the way I often see people's stories play out when I see them in the hospital or in my clinic. So maybe you were a child who had asthma and eczema and started using antihistamines regularly when you were a child. Okay, I gave my 2-year-old antihistamines when he was 2 because he had asthma, according to his doctor. Maybe by the time you were a teenager, you were having issues with acne, heavy periods, and fatigue during your periods. Okay, maybe by the time you were done with college and you were working full time, you were always just a little tired. Maybe you started having some neck pain, and then you got used to the neck pain and the achiness, right? Maybe by the time you were 30, you chalked up being tired to that stage of life. And you didn't even notice that your nose started to run when you were eating certain foods. And you reasoned away that joint pain was from maybe from exercising too much, maybe from running too much, and that should be expected, right? And by the time you hit 40, you just know that you're supposed to expect that it's going to go downhill. I literally had somebody at my church say that, yeah, I mean, I don't have anything good to say. It's all downhill after 40. And I thought, oh gosh, it's not. I'm in my best health now and I'm over 40. So you expect it to be downhill. You expect that you're going to have weight gain that you can't control. That 30-year-old fatigue has melted into constant sort of brain fog and sluggishness, and you have sleep issues now. And oh yeah, the hot flashes. But those are normal and expected, right? So at what time in this brief life history did you ever actually feel normal and healthy? What the heck is normal anyway? So my point is that you often don't know that you feel bad until you actually feel better, or until you go to your primary care doctor and your labs are all wonky, right? All that preamble to prepare you to listen to this podcast on the topic of alcohol use with an open and humble mind, and take from it what will serve you best in your life and bring you to a better overall health. That's my heart for you guys. Okay, so let's get started. All right, so alcohol. It is the longest lasting and most socially approved drug of all time. The first use of alcohol was recorded back as far as 7,000 BC China, when they were mixing honey and rice into some rudimentary early mead mixture. Honey fermented as mead, right? And they often used it in like religious ceremonies. There are even biblical references to alcohol use. Do you guys remember the story of Noah in the 9th chapter of Genesis? Here they are, the small family of Noah. They just survived the first ever most cataclysmic event of the whole earth flood. Okay. They witnessed unimaginable destruction and loss. The Bible indicates that the first thing that Noah did upon exiting the ark was to worship God for saving and protecting his family. But the very next recorded event is Noah planting a vineyard and getting drunk. Now, considering that the most common use for alcohol today is to, number 1, celebrate, and number 2, forget or numb our emotions, we can sort of sympathize with Noah, who had just experienced the first ever natural disaster recorded for wanting to do one of those two things, either celebrate being, rescued, or numb the pain of watching people suffer and die. So alcohol over the record of human history has been used for libations, for religious ceremonies, and as a medicinal tonic. But is it really good to drink alcohol routinely? So the most recent research is conflicted, to say the least. The standing argument and consensus in the research, and I will give caveats to this, is that small amounts of alcohol, and we're talking a half a glass of wine and not on a cumulative binge weekend, is good for the heart and preventing stroke. So I remember seeing headlines like these, and I'll show you here. I'm going to put some up here. Maybe not even four or 5 years ago, promoting drinking a glass of wine for heart health. And it has a lot to do with the resveratrols, which are antioxidants, right? They're supposed to help the brain and the heart. And that's really, it's really interesting. Even Dr. Axe, not about that time, did a segment on the benefits of drinking red wine and indicating that red wine was beneficial for, quote, the heart, the brain, and even weight loss. And of course, he did indicate that it was a half a glass of wine or less, and I'll put a link to that. It's a short little video from Dr. Axe. You'll find the video up here, okay? So according to the Harvard Review, and I'm going to reference this one because it's pretty thorough. The Harvard Review published April 2022 kind of summarized the research, and they did a decent job of going through the ins and outs. They mentioned the links between, death and abuse and violence and all that associated with alcohol to keep us in a perspective of remembering that alcohol is not without cost. Okay. So they said that currently moderate drinking has some health benefits, but we want to kind of define what moderate drinking is. Like, what is it? There's actually a definition, because we can say, I can convince myself that I drink modestly and I drink 3 glasses of wine a night. That might be moderate for you compared to like the people you are around, right? But moderate drinking is actually defined by the literature as, for women, it's strictly no more than 1 drink per day. And for men, 1 to 2 maximum. However, there is other research that conflicts this, so we'll touch that in a minute. Now the question is, what is 1 drink? Because, right, I can do 1 drink and I can fill my wine glass, right? 1 drink has a definition. It's actually defined in the literature as it depending on the alcohol and its alcohol content, right? Whether or not it has a lot of alcohol, like if it's strong, is it 5.6% alcohol? Is it 12% alcohol? Obviously, wine and spirits have higher alcohol than beer. So it is 12 ounces of beer or 5 ounces of wine or 1.5 ounces of spirits. So it gets smaller, obviously, as the alcohol content of the drink goes up. And I actually heard someone say that if you are in other countries, they actually make their drink really strong. So it's really important that you look at the grams of alcohol. I understand it to be 10 grams of alcohol per day at the minimum, at the most. So no more than 10 grams. So you have to do some mathematical calculations there. But in general, we'll say 12 ounces of American beer, 5 ounces of American wine, and 1.5 ounces of spirits, which would be your vodka, gin, those type of things. So I actually brought you visuals to see how much that looks like, because I think that, like, are you going to have your little ounce measurement cup out when you're at your bar, at your friend's house, or at home? Are you going to measure this? I want you to get a visual of this. So here is what 12 ounces of beer looks like. And this is not beer. I'm going to tell you what it is. This is actually my measuring glass for mixed drinks, as if I drink mixed drinks that much. This is what 5 ounces of wine looks like. Okay. That's a half a glass, isn't it? And here, I'm sorry guys, if you're listening on the podcast, you tune into the YouTube and you'll see what I'm talking about. This, and I used the same thing I used for my beer, but this is 1.5 ounces of spirit. So it's a little bigger than a shot glass. Just in case you're curious, I was using this GT root beer mushroom soda as my beer because I want to drink that afterwards. That is red wine, but I'm going to discard it because I don't drink red wine, and I don't think anybody in our house does either. So anyhow, that's a big deal, right? So those are kind of clear visuals, and that's probably going to help affect how you choose how much to drink, right? If you keep to this guideline, strictly this guideline, that's 1 glass of wine for you, women, 2 of those for men, maximum. It's going to help you maybe protect yourself to some degree. So if we're using those guidelines, we're going to experience, according to the literature, there are some benefits if you stay below that guideline, that what I just showed you, 12 ounces of beer, 5 ounces of wine, and 1.5 of spirits per day. So benefits of moderate alcohol consumption, defined by what we just talked about, are improved cardiovascular health. So apparently alcohol does raise your good cholesterol. I would honestly argue, based on the rest of the research I've seen, not the Google consensus, that this may be true if we're talking about red wine because of the resveratrols, but I have a hard time believing that toxin, ethanol, alcohol, can raise high density lipoproteins, which is the good cholesterol. That's your good stuff. We want that to be high in your body. So in doing that, it's supposed to be heart protective. It does decrease clotting, but I think that that's not necessarily a good thing. It does, by decreasing clotting, it's going to prevent ischemic strokes. But the problem is, I think those are rarer than an older person falling and hitting their head and getting a subdural hematoma, which is bleeding between the hard skull and the dura, like that covers the brain, that causes pressure on the brain. That bleeding is more likely to occur if you have poor clotting ability. So, take that for what you want. How about modest protection against type 2 diabetes? According to literature, you have modest protection against type 2 diabetes. I didn't explain the mechanism, and I don't understand that process, but that's what the literature says. There's some modest protection against gallstones. That makes sense to me. And then they said there is a reduced risk of dementia. Now, this is why this is on this podcast, because we talk about preventing dementia. So the benefits have to be balanced against the risk. And when we interview my Amanda, who we're bringing on to at the end of this segment, we're going to talk a little bit about that. She actually gets a lot of the statistics, and it's amazing. So there is a risk of increased breast cancer, oral cancer, liver cancer, GI cancer, and honestly, weight gain. And that makes sense. Okay, you did hear correctly that I said that according to the literature, moderate drinking did lower all-cause risks of dementia. So our dementia risk goes down. This is in a population that consumes a modest amount of alcohol routinely. Emphasis is on modest, and remember the sizes I showed you. In that case, in the volume of the sizes I showed you. Okay, in the case of brain health, it's significant to mention the size and what we're talking about with the guidelines of what moderate looks like: 5 ounces, 12 ounces, 1 ounce per day. Because once you exceed that, you actually increase your risk of dementia. So see this like this very delicate balance here. As long as you keep it under this amount, but if you exceed it, now we are actually increasing our risk for dementia by 36%. So it's a pretty significant amount. And the more you drink, the higher your risk, because we know it causes shrinking of the brain tissue. So heavy drinkers are the ones that are at the highest risk. And that has a definition in the medical literature. And that's a woman who drinks more than 4 drinks at one time. So binge drinking of 4 drinks at one time for women, or 5 for men, is binge drinking. Or, this is where it gets really interesting, weekly drinking more than 8 drinks for women. So that's a little bit over that 1 drink a day. So I think 7 days a week. 8 drinks for women or 15 for men is considered heavy alcohol drinking. So it's a very delicate balance. So those are things, those are really important things to think about. And the other things that you might want to consider about whether or not alcohol is something that might be safe for you and you want to use it for protecting yourself against dementia, according to the literature, by drinking a little bit at a time. Well, there's some things that may affect you and your ability to handle alcohol and gain benefit from it. Things to consider would be, do I detox well? Do I have impaired detoxification pathways? Alcohol literally causes methylation changes in your methylation, like in your detoxification pathways. There's a lot of talk about MTHFR and that gene mutation, but methylation changes can occur from environmental exposure as well. And you need methylation in order to replicate your cells. When methylation is impaired, that's what causes cancer. Okay, so do you detoxify well, or do you have methylation issues? If you do, maybe drinking isn't the best thing for you. Do you maybe have inherited gene mutations that affect B12 or folate metabolism, because alcohol burns through those nutrients? So if you already have issues absorbing those micronutrients and you drink alcohol, you're setting yourself up for a lot of health issues. Are you a fast or slow metabolizer of alcohol? So there's the way alcohol is broken down is you have alcohol, it's broken down by something called alcohol dehydrogenase, an enzyme, into alcohol, acetyl alcohol. And then that gets broken down into acetate. Both of those are really toxic. Acetyl alcohol is extremely toxic to the body. So if you have the breakdown occurring and it stays there long in that form and isn't removed from the body, it's going to cause a lot of damage. So fast metabolizers, so the people that don't really feel the alcohol, those actually get less benefit from the cardiovascular supposed benefits of drinking. So if you're a person who's like, I got a high tolerance, I never feel it. I don't get drunk. I can drink glasses of wine and I don't feel anything. You actually have a less cardiovascular benefit from the alcohol consumption. So now you're just taking on the risks, right? How about your environment? Always, always, always remember that we are exposed to toxins every day in our hair products and our beauty products and our food and our work environments, our home environments. Do you have mold in your house? Do you work, at an airport where there's all that fuel and all that cleaning product and all those fumes, right? Or name your environment. The synopsis of the research says, modest drinking, if you follow the guidelines, it's gonna have benefits to your brain and your heart. And that's the synopsis. But I want you to remember that also that published research in human health is often behind and incomplete. And the data that they're using for this information is also retrospective. It's not double-blind placebo-controlled studies like we do for, in mice and in to test for drugs and things like that. So that's one thing to remember. This is a survey type study. It's not a robust scientific research. They're big populations they've surveyed, but nonetheless, it's a survey study. And it also is, there are conflicting studies, as you'll hear later when I talk to Amanda. She shares a Lancet study that showed, alcohol, the best amount of alcohol, the safest amount of alcohol is 0. So the research is conflicted. So today in 2023, our population overall is less healthy also than the people that were surveyed from 30 years of drinking, right? Today we are sicker. We just are. We're more toxic. We don't detoxify well. We have more toxic exposure in our environments. So that's another thing you want to consider. And then also, we mentioned the gene mutation MTHFR. About 67% of people have that gene mutation, and that makes them unable to metabolize B12 and folate well and detox well, and it puts them at an independently high risk for cancer. And then if we deplete those nutrients more with alcohol, that's a big thing, right? I am a huge fan of customized health support when it comes to diet, supplements, and lifestyle even including alcohol consumption. Maybe you are a person who can handle it. Maybe you're not. So remember that these guidelines are exactly that. They're guidelines. And I want you to just kind of listen to what Harvard Review said. They did a very good job in summarizing the takeaways from all the research. And I would say they did a very good job with that. I would only add that I still, as a holistic health practitioner, I don't want to be that holistic health practitioner who's like, you have to eat this way and you can't do anything fun and no alcohol for you ever. That's not the goal here. I don't want to take away what you enjoy, but I do want you to have the power and knowledge to advocate for yourself. At the end of the podcast, at the end of our interview, I'll post on our YouTube video my favorite mocktail, which is a non-alcoholic cocktail, kind of like our modern Shirley Temples. And I might share with you a few tips that I use to help support my body if I do choose to drink the next day, and eliminating the side effects of that sluggish feeling, the discomfort that you feel after drinking some alcohol. This would not be a recommendation. First of all, it's not medical advice. Second of all, it's not a recommendation that you can just take and use so that you can drink as much as you want. Okay, it's just going to be a guide of my favorite way to support my body. Okay, and you take it or leave it. So here's what Harvard Review summarizes it at. They say, number 1, if you're thin, physically active, don't smoke, eat a healthy diet, and have no family history of heart disease, drinking alcohol will not add any benefit to your cardiovascular health. It's got no benefits. Don't bother. Number 2, if you don't drink, there's no need to start. You can get the same benefits with exercise, if beginning exercise, if you don't already do it, or boosting it if you do already exercise. Boost your activity, boost your intensity, boost your duration. And they said healthy eating. So exercise and healthy eating is better, is what they're saying. Number 2, if you're a man, or 3, if you're a man with no history of alcoholism in your family, who's at moderate risk for or moderate to high risk of heart disease, a daily alcoholic drink could reduce your risk. Moderate drinking might be especially beneficial if you have low HDL. That just doesn't budge. That's pretty much what they're summarizing that on. Number 4, if you're a woman with no history of alcoholism, a moderate or high risk of heart disease, the possible benefits of the daily drink must be balanced against the risk of breast cancer, which is elevated with daily consumption of alcohol. If you already drink alcohol or plan to begin, keep it moderate. This is the final statement they make. No more than 2 drinks a day for men, and no more than 1 drink for women. And make sure that you get adequate amounts of folate. This is what Harvard Review says is an adequate amount of folate, and they say it's 400 micrograms per day. I would also add B12 because you need those vitamins. You have no idea. And maybe if I have a chance to pull up the Krebs cycle, which is going to geek you out for real, I will get you an image here and I'll show it to you. And I'll show you exactly why B12 and folate are so important, because they literally mobilize and cause the metabolism in your Krebs cycle at every single level. The Krebs cycle is the energy cycle of your mitochondria, the foundation area, the powerhouse of the cell where all the energy of your body is made. And if you don't have enough mitochondria, if you don't have enough B12 and folate, then your mitochondria can't do their job. And guess what part of the body has the most dense amount of mitochondria? That would be the brain, the brain and the heart. So yes, if you're going to drink, please also supplement folate, and I would add B12. So I wanted to start with the facts around social drinking and the influence it can have on long-term brain health before I introduce my next guest, which is Amanda Linton. And I just finished the interview with her. I'm so excited for you to hear from her. And you're gonna enjoy this interview. And I'm sorry I'm running a little long. This is going to be an hour and a half podcast video blog. So put us on pause, put us on save to watch later, whatever, on YouTube. Hit us, just take it in segments. It's probably a good idea because it's a lot of information and it's a lot to sit with, right? So Amanda and I worked as colleagues in anesthesia. She is among the ranks of the high achieving, the hardworking healthcare professionals that make up the world of the operating room. One thing that marks my anesthesia colleagues in particular is their diverse interests and talents. It takes a tremendous amount of work and dedication to achieve a career in anesthesia. But what really makes it interesting is that the people that work that hard to achieve a career in anesthesia, they are also people that pursue other challenges outside of their careers. I have literally met anesthesia colleagues who are ultra marathoners, bodybuilders, professional artists, stand-up comedians, race car drivers, mountain climbers, and today you are going to meet an author. So Amanda is from a small town. She's a wife, she's a mother, she's a certified nurse anesthetist, and an all-around wonderful person. I've watched her blossom and flourish as she overcame her own health struggles related to alcohol. And I was so impressed with her courage as she shared the story of her struggles with the world. And she wrote a book about that experience. So let me tell you, Amanda holds nothing back in her book. She is vulnerable, she's raw, honest, passionate, and she is engaging. She shares her story while giving you some very difficult and unpopular facts around alcohol. And even if you do not struggle with alcohol in any way, you will find something about her story that you can relate to, believe me. So you'll obviously get the link to purchase her book on Amazon. It will be in the show notes. Any resources that I can provide for you will also be in the show notes. So I am excited for you guys to meet Amanda. So without any further ado, here we go. All right. Well, welcome to the podcast, Amanda. I'm so glad to have you.
Hi, I'm glad to be here. Yay.
I'm really excited for you to share your story about your book that you authored. It's really a good book.
Yes,
And I enjoyed reading it. I really did.
Okay, good. I got
meant
it right
to bring
here.
it down. Yeah. Oh, good. You brought it. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Where can they get the
It's
book?
on Amazon.
All right.
Yep.
You have
just
a
type Pour It
separate
Out
website?
on Amazon and it'll pop right up.
Sweet.
Yeah.
Well, I really enjoyed reading it, your book, and the thing that really struck me was that it was really relatable. And even for a person who doesn't struggle with alcohol, like consumption and stuff, there was a lot of relatable bits.
I had one girl say, she called me about it, and she, wasn't a heavy drinker or anything, and she's like, this book changed my life, like, thank you for writing it. And I was like, oh my gosh, like,
I know.
So that was cool.
Success.
I was like, yay.
My life has got such good, it's blessing others. That's such a blessing. I mean, your life blesses others in the work you already do. But before we get too far, and I could just chat with you all day, I enjoy talking to you. Can you share a little bit about your story that inspired you to write the book?
Well, what I really think compelled me to write the book was the fact that alcohol abuse is ignored until it's in the later stages. And I think it's important for people to catch it early. And one of the quotes in my book is that you don't have to be homeless, jobless, and helpless to be an alcoholic.
I highlighted that.
Yeah. But that's how you become that way. So we only hear about the stories of alcoholism once, we've kind of exhausted all efforts and, how everybody's going down the wrong path at that point. And when you get to that phase, you've been struggling for almost probably decades at this point, and that people just thought that was the normal because it's so accepted in society. And so me still like being a successful young woman and opening up about it to other people, I felt like was necessary. So then people would be like, oh, I wouldn't have thought she had a problem. And then maybe they can self-evaluate and catch something early. So that's why I was like, I've got to tell people.
Yeah, that's really good. Do you want to share a little bit of your background story? kind of give a
Well,
synopsis
so
of,
yeah,
without telling
just
the
a
whole
little.
story that's in the
Yeah,
book?
yeah. Well, so basically, I was raised thinking alcohol every day was normal. It was just kind of a
Mm,
rite of passage into adulthood. Um, the roller coasters of life, well, of my life. It was basically every day was a roller coaster
mhm,
growing up, and I thought that was normal and what life was supposed to look like.
mhm.
Um, I, I didn't even question alcohol being an issue in my life till I was almost, oh, well, in my 20s is
Yeah.
when I was like, okay, maybe life doesn't have to look like this. But
What
then I
made you
would,
question that? Like, what
oh,
made you
just bad
come to that
choices.
realization?
Oh,
Okay.
yeah. Like whenever all the, first your hangovers and bad decisions and getting in bad positions. And you're like, oh, life doesn't have to look like this. And then you're like, oh,
Mhm.
well, it's okay. Or you say the infamous words, I'll never drink again.
Uh-huh.
And
Uh-huh.
then the next night you're like, oh yeah, we'll go out, we'll do something.
Yeah.
And so I really think the fact that the world views it as such a normal
Yeah.
thing to do, I think that helped me kind of mask my own struggle because
Mhm.
I felt like I was still normal.
Yeah.
But
100%.
obviously I wasn't. But it
Yeah.
took a lot of like inward looking to find, to see that.
I think it's extremely common for societally acceptable. Is that the right word? To drink daily? I mean, I don't,
Oh
the
yeah.
volume isn't necessarily great, but we talk about mom juice and like I just
Hmm.
need that glass of wine when I get home. Like,
Oh
you know.
yeah, yeah. It's you know, it's gotten a lot worse for women too
Mhm.
because
Mhm.
there was a study done in 2020. It was like all over the news. There, last year was in the news.
Mm.
It made it to the news a few years later, but it was women. It was 40% higher increase in death from liver disease in women in the past 10 years. And it was,
Wow.
um, yeah, and because it used to be kind of like a manly thing to do. And in the
Uh-huh.
past, like 20 so years, women, now it's become mom juice. Now it's like
Yep.
acceptable to sit there and drink wine every night when you get
Yep.
home from work. And
Yep.
so in the death rate of these women are between 35 and 42, and that's increased
35 and 42.
years old. Yeah, because they
Oh my
start
gosh.
binging in their teens and 20s,
Yep.
and then they've hit liver failure by their late 30s.
Wow.
And so that's a
Wow.
40% increase. Yeah, so that's why it's like important to
It's
catch.
incredible.
Yeah, it's important to catch soon or it'll be too late.
Yeah,
So
yeah. It's definitely something that I see being the flag is being waved a little bit more, and it's a little bit more less polarizing nowadays to maybe talk about that alcohol might not be good. In fact, I think Huberman even did a whole long episode on alcohol and all the physiological effects. And
mhm.
needless to say, like I think he was looking for something to give people. Like there are some benefits, but they're just really aren't. And
Mhm.
we are going to talk a little bit about the physiological effects that you did a great job of like mixing together like your story and your experiences and then geeking out on us like a
Yes,
good
I was
nurse
like,
anesthetist.
yeah, I was like, we've got to get real here.
Yeah. Yeah. Here's the data, and the data it's impressive. But you know, for you, I understood that in your story that you were exposed to alcohol in an early period in your
Mhm.
life. So like it was just part of your life, like from
Oh yeah.
childhood on. And you
Mhm.
shared how you got drunk your first time when you were 13 years old.
Mhm. Yeah,
That
it was like an event.
that's like, and mom provided the alcohol.
Mhm. Yeah.
You know, I thought about that, and I was like, I never, that was not my experience, but I did remember friends of mine
Mm-hmm.
growing up where that was their experience, where they're like, well, mom said, they're going to bring the alcohol, that way they can keep an eye on the kids, and they're doing their
Right.
good job of being a
Mm-hmm.
parent by letting them drink here, at my
Right.
house
Yeah.
with me nearby, because they're going to do it anyway, right? That's
Right.
not necessarily true.
Mm-hmm.
And how it's, taking away that obstacle of making the child have to really work to get alcohol, which is hard to do when you're 13 years
Mm-hmm.
old, by just delivering it to them, is just
Right. Well, and I think it kind of
something
takes
else.
away the danger of it. Like, because
Mm-hmm.
people need to know it's dangerous, and we don't
Mm-hmm.
talk about that. We just kind of talk about, like, they say drink responsibly. I'm like,
Yeah.
okay.
Yeah.
I'm like, and then on the side of the cans, it says don't drink while pregnant.
Right.
And I'm like,
That's the
okay.
thing
I'm
that
like,
just, I was like, fetal alcohol syndrome. Okay. I had friends who adopted children who were born to crack moms.
hmm
Okay. And those babies recovered and they did just fine. But if you had that same mom drinking alcohol, that child would have a deformity. Its brain would
hmm
have been permanently damaged, and it would have
hmm
probably had cardiac abnormalities as well, like all kinds of
right,
anatomical abnormalities. So we
right.
know it's not good for our
Well, like
body.
the it should, on the side of the can, it should say all the bad things it does, and like it should like warn. Well, I guess we just ignore it too since it's legal,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but
Yeah.
still, it's not. It's I just feel like it's too culturally acceptable.
Mm-hmm. Why do you think that there's more of a outcry against alcohol nowadays? Do you have any ideas? I mean, I feel
Um,
like there is a little bit more of
oh
a
yeah, I
voice
think
coming
so.
out.
Because for one, like I feel like we're all able to get our stories out more
Hmm.
because, YouTube and, media outlets are everywhere and all that. So I really feel like it's kind of, you know, alarmed people. People are
Hmm.
like, oh, wow, like
I didn't
this
know
can
that.
happen. Oh,
Yeah.
like this can happen. Or stuff that they used to think only the really strung out people, it only happened to them.
Hmm.
And I feel like everybody knows somebody
Oh yeah.
that gets,
1 degree of separation
yeah,
easily.
yeah, at
Oh, I could
least
think of three.
somebody. They're like, oh,
Yeah.
this guy, he ruined his family, and oh,
Hmm.
this guy, he had a DUI and hurt somebody
Hmm.
in the vehicle, or this guy, is in rehab 10 times. And so
Yeah.
everybody knows somebody or is related to somebody that's it's affected.
You're making me think of one of those quotes, and I don't know if I copied. I want to see if I put it in my notes for you, but I remember I had so much highlighted in your book I wanted to talk to you about. But the data on abuse, like domestic abuse, and how many people are,
Oh, oh yeah, it
drinking.
was like, I want to say almost 60%.
Oh, here it is.
Or
55% of domestic abuse cases are related to alcohol. That's what
yeah,
you put.
yeah.
And then
So
95,000 deaths per year occur due to alcohol. That's 261 deaths per day, is what you said. I was like,
and we
wow.
still just pull it out like and have it at dinner, and I'm
And
like,
drink
why?
responsibly.
Yeah, I'm like, why do we do that? And or like, even let's say the people that are involved in domestic abuse, you
Hmm.
know, why do they continue to allow alcohol in their life? Like,
Hmm.
because it lowers all your
Hmm.
inhibitions. Like, you're basically your filter has disappeared. So
Hmm.
if somebody that would normally not hurt a person
Hmm.
would do it drunk on alcohol.
Right.
So
I mean, is it okay if I kind of talk about your story a little bit?
mhm.
Domestic abuse was part of your story with
Oh yeah.
alcohol. And I
Mm,
thought that was really insightful and interesting that you said that you didn't connect that the alcohol was the problem because you were growing up in poverty, and
mhm.
you thought it was a lack of money
I
that was
did.
the
I thought
problem.
all our problems were because we
That's
were
why mom and
poor.
dad were drinking.
Yeah, I thought we were poor and like all our problems were like, oh, we can't pay our bills, we can't do this, da da da. And drinking happened to be at the center of all that. We wouldn't have
Hmm.
any of those problems if they had not been drinking. Like,
Right.
And I feel like that's like a lot of families these days.
Mm-hmm.
The divorce rate, is high, like over 50%.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people's arguments and fights and all that are caused by drinking,
100%.
And so if they took that element out,
Right.
families could survive too.
Yeah. So it affects the most vulnerable, the
Hmm.
children, as
Hmm.
is part of your story, you know.
I didn't realize that that was the case till in my 20s, like I said. And then, and after I
You had
became a
achieved
nurse anesthetist.
success.
Yeah,
You
I
had
became a
achieved
nurse
success.
anesthetist and was making money. And I noticed all these like roller coaster problems happening in my life. And I'm
Uh-huh.
like, I have money. Like, why is this happening to me? Even though I achieved my success. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, there's one thing that's still there that I have
Yeah.
not changed, and it was the alcohol. And I was like, well,
I think that your job and your critical thinking skills that you had to hone to do anesthesia
hmm
actually helped you peel that back a little bit
yeah,
more than
I think so. I
you know.
think so. And I think watching like my father go through what he went through
Mm-hmm.
kind of pushed me to read it into it too, because like I had a fear of becoming like him.
Mm-hmm.
Watch, and so I really saw that if I kept drinking, I was going to go down the exact same path. And I was like, the only way to stop this is to cut it out
Mm-hmm.
completely.
Can you share a little bit about that with your what happened with your father? Because I thought it was really interesting.
Hmm.
Both you shared a story about a patient you had in the ICU dying of cirrhosis, and then
Yes. So
your dad's story. So.
yes. So, a few times in my life, I had been kind of touched by people.
Mm-hmm.
That I felt like they were in my life for a reason, and I didn't know why.
Mm-hmm.
And,
Mm-hmm.
like the patient in ICU that was passing away
Mm-hmm.
from cirrhosis and lost all his family and everything, he
Mm-hmm.
told me it wasn't worth it. He said,
Mm-hmm.
Amanda, I want you to know that alcohol is not worth it.
Mm-hmm.
He's like, I'm
Mm-hmm.
here dying alone. And I was like, I'm going to remember that forever.
Yeah.
And so then, that was when I was 21
Wow.
when I got that story.
Uh-huh.
And but then I was still in that phase of, oh, that's not going to be me.
Uh-huh.
It's never going to be me or
Yeah.
whatever.
I have control over this.
Yeah.
This bear is on a leash.
Yes, yes. And then my dad, he was a functioning alcoholic for 40 years.
Wow.
So it's
Wow.
decades of decades. And
Mm-hmm.
then he turned, well, I want to say it got really bad when he was 55, is when he started, like, he kept losing his jobs and then DUI after DUI.
Mm-hmm.
Um, he had already been to rehabs a few times, but now we're back in rehabs again,
Mm-hmm.
homeless,
Mm.
um, you know, just self harming,
Mm.
all the things that I would call him and try to talk to him. And
Mm-hmm.
he was just at a point and he would say, Mandy, I can't beat this.
Mm-hmm.
He's like,
Mm-hmm.
this is it for me.
Mm-hmm.
And so
Mm-hmm.
he just wasn't at a mental state anymore to
Mm-hmm.
where he,
It's
he
almost like
mhm.
brain damage.
It
True, true, because we
is
know that.
right. So MRIs of a chronic drinker
Mm-hmm.
is, I mean, it's just night and day.
Right.
Like, it looks like the brain has shriveled up.
Yes.
And that's what had happened to him. So all the
Mm-hmm.
decision making and
Mm-hmm.
personality traits
Mm-hmm.
and confidence, everything that
Mm-hmm.
your brain can normally provide you,
Mm-hmm.
like once you get that far down, it's like so much harder
Mm-hmm.
to get out of it. And it's
Well,
not
there's
even your
several.
fault. It's your
Yeah,
brain's.
it's your brain's damp. I mean, it's like
Hmm.
TBI. It's interesting because the research shows that there's first of all there's like cortical thinning, so we get like loss of white matter, and the whole, the white matter is where all our cerebral cortex and all our complex thinking happens. But not just that, we also lose the synaptic connection because the neurotransmitters are damaged. So not just the firing, but also the connections between nerve cells gets damaged. So it really does. It is a true TBI, or traumatic brain injury, of a
Right.
poisoning, a chronic poisoning.
Right.
It's and it's interesting because, I mean, in what you're saying with your dad, the prefrontal cortex is the most damaged, and it's the most initially damaged. It's what you see when you get drunk. You get this disinhibition of the dopaminergic neurons in the prefrontal cortex, because that
Right.
takes away your inhibition. But those get damaged over time to the point where there's very little firing, and that's what changes the behavior. That's where your dad started decompensating, like, like
And
he
then,
can no longer.
the stories that, or somebody's like, oh, so and so, he won't listen. I can't get him to listen.
Mm-hmm.
We're like, it's a actual, at this point, it's a brain injury. Like, I
Mm-hmm.
don't know how to get them to listen at that point,
Right.
So that's the key of getting this in the front end of alcohol abuse. So that
Mm-hmm.
way you don't progress to that stage,
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
like there needs to be a light on this somewhere,
Mm-hmm.
you know?
Mm-hmm. Working in healthcare, I think it's fascinating because I mean, you see it a lot. And if you work in a hospital, you'll see there's whole wings dedicated to alcohol withdrawal. At least
Mm-hmm.
here in the Colorado Springs, we have a whole like
Yeah.
floor for the
Mm-hmm.
homeless that come in and they have to detox. And the detoxing, they have to do it inpatient. It's the only substance, and it's the legal one, that is
Isn't that
actually
interesting?
life threatening if you withdraw from.
Yeah.
It's totally like you can seizure to
Mm-hmm.
death. You can
Right.
withdraw from meth, you can withdraw from coke, you can withdraw from pretty much any of these
Well, think
like
of COVID.
street
During
substances.
COVID,
Yeah.
everything was shut down, and but liquor stores had to stay open.
Right.
You know, and I'm
Right.
like, guys, like, shouldn't this be a sign
Yeah.
that something's not right here?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, we got to keep those liquor stores open because we can't have people seizing to death. We got to keep the
Exactly.
hospitals are
Yeah.
too busy.
I'm like, that just shows we have a country full of alcoholics.
Yeah, it's a big deal. And I
Yeah.
mean, it's a worldwide epidemic. It's
It
not
is. Mm-hmm.
not just the US.
Mm-hmm.
But um, you know, I really I loved how you shared your story. You used the suffering that you went through in your life. Um, and you kind of did God took it and he redeemed it, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you used it for the good of others. It's very common for people like you and I.
Yeah.
We
Yeah.
find out
Like, we feel.
something, we
Yeah.
struggle, we're going to try to help others. Your
Mm-hmm.
story is definitely an example of that. And you even say in your book, I've been sober for like 3.5 years, and I have felt the compelling need to help others on their alcohol-free journey. I definitely think that those of us who are struggling are kind of gifted with, we're gifted that opportunity to serve others. And
Right.
I
Yes.
I love that you did that with your book. And
Yeah.
I hope it like I hope people pick it up even if they don't drink alcohol, because there's just so
Mm-hmm.
many nuggets. There are a few things that stuck out to me in that book, and I want to just talk about them. I took notes, so I'm going to just read a few of them, and I'm going to go ahead and dive into the heavy really quick right up front.
Mm-hmm.
In the first chapter, you almost it's like you almost make a warning about the reality that when you stop drinking routinely, like if you're a
Mm-hmm.
drinker and you stop drinking, emotions and thoughts and even sometimes unaddressed traumas start to emerge. You say you spent a lifetime dulling those emotions with a substance. The emotions are strong, painful, and scary. You will have entered real life. No lidocaine, no
Mm-hmm.
anesthetic. I love that.
Mm-hmm.
Tip to
Had to
anesthesia.
put that
Tip to
still in
anesthesia.
there. Yeah.
I loved that statement. The
Mm-hmm.
statement was, first of all, relatable to many people. I don't, not everybody uses alcohol to
Mm-hmm.
numb their substances. Some of us
Mm-hmm.
might choose to run away and work to death.
Right.
Like they're workaholics. There's a reason they combine those
Yeah.
words,
Yeah.
workaholics,
That's right. That is funny.
I mean, and it's a way to not have to deal with it. I actually had someone tell me, if I stay busy enough, I don't have to worry about it.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm like, that's the same thing as alcohol. running away from your emotions.
Right.
And the problem is that unaddressed trauma, I see this a lot in my practice. I do integrative health. If they don't deal with their emotions, it is going to emerge. There's actually a surgeon who wrote a book called The Body Keeps the Score. And it was about emotions and how it affected organs and how those organs responded to emotions, like the liver and the heart and these things.
I like that.
So yeah, it's really interesting. So I wanted to ask you if you would like to share how you managed through that time, where I'm sure that was probably the hardest part of stopping your routine drinking, is dealing with the emotions that emerged, because there's a lot, you had a lot of painful experiences in your life. So
yes. So at first, what I had to deal with was, actually like letting go of my crutch. And so I was kind of still handling that, like, 'cause that was kind of what I always ran to. And so anxiety was the number one, like just top of the notch, like uncontrollable, just uncomfortableness. Like you literally just walking in any room, I was shaky, I was nervous, and literally every emotion you could think of, like loneliness, feeling of inadequacies, like depression, like all that was just flooding in. And I literally felt like I wasn't enough for anyone or anything.
Yeah, you talked a lot about that, how your relationship with your husband,
Yes,
your perception of it was bad.
was different.
It was different than his.
Yeah, because it was something going on in my brain thinking that I wasn't enough and that no one else could love me because I couldn't even love me. And so it really was like a very one-sided perception that I had to get through. And I think the way I got through that, one of the first little pearls is kind of like a childlike way of explaining it.
It's perfect.
But I really like, how like the demon on one shoulder and an angel on the other. I basically knew that like a lot of what I was going through was due to alcohol brain. And so I called it alcohol brain, as in like that was the demon on my one shoulder telling me all these horrible things. And so every horrible thought that went through my mind, I deemed as from the demon. And I was like, that's not me. That's not my mind telling me that. That is this alcohol brain demon on this side. And so any good thought that I had or could come up with in my mind, I literally was like, okay, see, look, I could learn to live again without this. And
wow. You literally did mindset work on your own.
Yes, I really did. I was like, see, and so any negative thought, I literally channeled in to convince myself that it wasn't my thought. It was alcohol's thought. And so I made alcohol as it was a person in my, and so that's kind of how I did that. Another thing I did was a whole bunch of research on anytime I would, get my anxiety and all, I would just start researching again and like, okay, why do I need to do this? And this causes this causes this. And then another way I handled it was writing a list down in my phone of why I don't drink. And
that's really
was
good.
Yeah, it was like 15 long reasons of why I don't drink anymore. So
it's like you did affirmations on your phone. Like,
yes, I did. And so anytime I questioned, I just pulled it up and I'd be like, oh yeah, like it's not worth it. None of that's worth it. And then with all my traumas coming back from childhood, when those would come in, I would literally have to sit in them. And so I made myself sit in them.
That's not small. It's not a small thing. God, it's a big thing.
I sat in them and I literally, because I ignored them forever. And so as soon as I was like, there's no more ignoring this. Like there's no more pushing this to the back. It's not, something. I couldn't convince myself it didn't matter anymore because it
Mm-hmm.
mattered. And
Mm-hmm.
so,
Right. Right.
I sat anytime I had like questions about what I went through or anything, I didn't push it to the back of my mind.
Mm-hmm.
I dealt with it. And so that's something I had not done.
That's a big deal. What were some of the things that you I don't know how to say it. Like when you say things, the trauma from your childhood emerged. Like like
Mhm.
what were some of those things? Like for example, I have an experience personally with
Mhm.
childhood trauma as well, and I would think about the experience, but then the emotion was I felt abandoned,
Mhm.
or I felt unloved, or I
Mhm.
felt rejected. Like the when I was a child, I would name an
Mhm.
emotion to that experience, what it created in me, and what it made, what like it became a trigger. Like those
Right.
similar
Well, so
experiences
it's
that were
funny
similar.
you mentioned triggers because everybody's all about that
I
with
know.
alcoholism.
Yeah.
So really, most of a lot of my childhood is blurred in my mind because I don't,
It might be a kindness from God.
yes,
you
yes, I
know,
kind of liked, I guess you would call it just a nice little
kind
blurry
kindness, the
there, yes.
protection from
And
your heart.
so, but what did happen would be I would call them triggers to
Mm-hmm.
drink because anytime I would feel emotions like I felt then
Mm-hmm.
is when I would want to drink. And
Ah,
so it's the,
so like fear, would that be one?
oh, fear. Oh, yeah. But my big one, well, fear definitely during society, like our social gatherings and all, was
Mm.
a big one for me. That's why, like, you got to be real careful. Which I think that's a lot of people that struggle with alcohol, like
Mm-hmm.
gatherings. It's just a very dangerous
Yeah.
place
Yeah.
because you are, everybody gets a little
Everybody's drinking.
socially awkward. Yeah,
Yeah.
everybody's scared. Like,
Yeah.
which is funny when you say it like that because none of us should be scared about being.
Being who we are, who God
Yeah,
created
yeah,
us to be.
right,
We
right.
bring our
But
own thing to
mhm,
the world. Like
yeah. And
that,
so I
you
just
know.
always have been like a people pleaser and I was always the life of the party and it was
Mm-hmm.
always fun.
Mm-hmm.
And so without drinking, I felt like I was no fun. I felt like nobody would like me. I felt like
Mm-hmm.
I was boring. I felt
Mm.
like I didn't need to be anywhere. So all those
Mm-hmm.
emotions would come up. And so that's hard to deal with. And so I just had to push through that.
Mm-hmm.
Um, if, you know, Loneliness was a big one, even though I would have some, I would know I could get people around. I just always felt like my friend was alcohol. So without it,
Mm-hmm.
I felt lonely somehow.
Oh, okay.
You
Yeah, that
know,
made sense. Yeah.
I felt like,
It's the one constant you had in your life. Mom
yeah,
wasn't constant, dad wasn't constant. Nobody was
yeah,
really constant, but
right. Yeah.
alcohol was constant.
Oh, yeah, always there for
Yeah.
me. And
Yeah. That's
so
interesting.
I think the key to it is when you have those emotions, or like even like we'll say triggers and emotions and
Mm-hmm.
the want to drink or or even like when those emotions just start running in,
Mm.
you don't block it out. Don't
Mm-hmm.
ignore it because
Mm-hmm.
ignoring it is,
Actually name it.
yeah,
Give it a
figure
name.
it out, figure it out.
Yeah.
Yeah, because if you try to suffocate it and push it back, then you're not working through it. So you
Mm-hmm.
just have to like be like, okay, I feel like this. Like this is, you know, not a good feeling. This sucks.
Mm-hmm.
and
Mm-hmm.
then
Mm-hmm.
and then kind of like, okay, why do I feel like this?
Mm-hmm.
Okay, what happened? To make me think this way, and
Mm-hmm.
what can I do to not feel like this?
I think that's hard. There's and I had a question about a statement you had in your book, and I'm going to relate it back to this. And like, still in your I had so many highlights in just your first chapter. In your first chapter, you talked about your childhood, and it was a lot of it resonated with me with like your addiction to achievement.
Mhm.
Since your childhood was less than stable, to say the least, and I feel like a lot of people can relate to that as well. You like craved, it sounded like you craved a sense of control, right?
Mhm.
You said, you actually say in your book, I see, I craved a sense of achievement. It was the only thing in my life that I could have control over. That,
Mhm.
that was, I understood that feeling. I was like,
Yeah.
that is what I did from
Yeah.
early on. Man,
Mhm.
I'm going to get out of here. I'm going to do my own thing. I'm going to be
Yeah.
in control of my life.
Yes.
It's
Mhm.
an illusion. Of course, we don't have real control of our life, but you
Right.
know,
But we thought we could,
yeah, right.
right.
Right. The relationship I wanted to make with the previous statement and that was that with that deep need to be in control when we're kind of coming out of an unstable childhood. Um, it's really nothing feels more out of control than your emotions when they surface and you
Mhm.
have to sit with them. Like the
Right.
control of us, like the control part wants to shove it back and
Mhm.
wants to just keep going. Like
Right.
it's almost a sign that in my childhood, I always got the impression that if I had to be emotional, that was a sign of weakness. Like I just need to
Mhm.
keep, there are things to do than dealing with
Right.
these silly
Mhm.
emotions.
And then you can deal with that later. And
Yeah,
so might as well should have just faced it head on.
right.
But
Yeah.
but yeah, I just really wanted to make something of myself. When I was a kid, like I was like, okay, I've got to get out of here. Like I'm gonna do whatever it takes.
Mm-hmm.
And like I felt like I had control over that.
Mm-hmm.
And
Mm-hmm.
then I felt real confident, like
Mm-hmm.
something to make me feel confident. And
Mm-hmm.
then how to relate that back to drinking. I mean, drinking made me feel confident.
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked, if I wanted to feel confident,
You made
in
an
the
A and you
initial,
drank.
right, yeah, I made an A, and then I was like, okay, party, I made an A. And,
Yeah. Oh yeah.
and I'm like, what in the world?
Yeah.
But
I can understand that. I
yeah,
remember
so
in PA school.
confidence was kind of something that came for both of that, which
Yeah.
that was really due to the inhibitions and all that the
Yeah.
alcohol provided. It was basically just letting down my,
Yeah.
you,
Your
my guard.
defenses. Yeah. Your
Yes, yes. And
yeah.
so it really wasn't confidence or anything. It was just
Right.
kind of like um, a an illusion.
A false confidence.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes, and
It's like playing at life. It's like
right, and
playing at it, not
mentioning
living it.
right, yeah. And mentioning control, that was one of my big things. Like you're saying that we're both saying you kind of gotta let go of the control to let those emotions like flow.
Mm-hmm.
That was also a big thing um, that I wanted to harp on in my
Mm-hmm.
book because I believe it full heartedly that if you believe you can control alcohol,
Mm-hmm.
alcohol is controlling you.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's what I kept telling myself for years
Mm-hmm.
is that like, okay, yeah, I can limit how much I can drink.
Mm-hmm.
I have control over this. Da, da. I even stopped
Mm-hmm.
a few times and was like, okay, I proved to myself I could stop.
Uh-huh.
I have control over the substance. So
Uh-huh.
same as with our emotions, you literally have to like admit that you have no control over that substance and your emotions. Like you
And your
just have to kind of
history.
work through it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then so yeah, so that's why I thought that was important.
That was really important. Another really profound statement that you made in your book. I'm gonna quote it. It says, "Growing up with traumatic experiences can really put a damper on our expectations. We learn to expect life like one we've known.
Mhm.
Let's see. Some people grow up expecting no more." And I was like, wow. I think
Mhm.
that bit of insight is really important for people to hear because it takes a while to identify the shortcomings of our childhood. Now, we don't want to sit there and just, my parents are terrible, life
Right.
is terrible, I'm a victim. That's
Right.
the opposite of what we're talking about
Right.
doing here,
Right.
is identifying the shortcomings. Like nothing, nobody's, I don't care who you are.
Right.
I cannot conceive that somebody had a perfect childhood ever. I don't care how much money you have or fame or what kind of home you come from.
Right.
Everybody's got some shortcoming somewhere in their childhood. So,
Mhm.
so this isn't to make our parents feel terrible because they did their best they
Right.
could with what they had.
Mhm.
Um, but the thing I thought was interesting was that, the human brain doesn't fully develop until 25 years old.
Mhm.
And so I find it very common that people can't identify the problems with the lifestyle. For okay, we've got the childhood trauma, but let's talk about lifestyle. Like for your example, your family drank all the time. How
Mhm.
old were you when you first saw the problem? Maybe starting to identify that there was a problem, mid-20s, right?
Right. Mhm.
So
And I'm
25
just gonna
is.
kind of, I'm gonna even like take it. I'm gonna even take it not as, I'm gonna take it more literal for a
Mm-hmm.
second
Mm-hmm.
instead of internal. So
Mm-hmm.
literally, like just imagine laying in a bed, looking at the roaches crawling on the ceiling. Okay,
Mm-hmm.
you're staring, and then they fall on you while you're sleeping.
Mm-hmm.
You're like, oh, like let's get this roach off. Like, oh, no,
Mm-hmm.
I'll keep sleeping. All right,
Mm-hmm.
that was when I was a kid.
Wow.
Now, if that happened to me now, I would have a nervous breakdown. Like, so I
Right.
thought that was, I
That was
didn't know better.
normal.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was normal. And so I
Yeah.
didn't know better.
Right.
I,
Exactly.
you know what I mean? And that's
Yeah.
just a literal statement. So
Right.
even if you take it mental,
Yeah.
all that stuff with the fighting and the
Yeah.
drinking and the, just the instability, the moving. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, I mean, it was just all normal to me.
Mm-hmm.
No structure was normal. Like
Mm-hmm.
not knowing where I was going to be that day, all that was normal. And so,
That's amazing.
you know what I mean? Like
Yeah.
that was normal for some reason.
Yeah. And it takes a little bit of living life a little bit too. Like, so
Mhm.
the brain has to develop a little bit so we can actually think critically about those experiences.
Right.
Literally,
Mhm.
the brain anatomically has to finish developing. That's one thing. But
Right.
it also takes some like life experiences. I remember you said in your book that even as a teenager, there were some people that you ran into that you saw that gave you a glimpse of life doesn't have to be like this. Like life isn't like
Yeah.
this for everybody.
Right. Yeah. So yeah, I had a few friends, they would invite me over and like I would see their parents like they'd invite the neighborhood kids over on Saturday mornings and cook breakfast for
Mm-hmm.
everybody. And then, like have movie nights on the couch with popcorn.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, wow, this is cool. Like
Could,
nobody's fighting.
yeah.
Like
Yeah.
we're all in one spot and we're having fun.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but I think I didn't really start to understand the drastic difference until I was like in college
Mm,
because I think I had to be out of that environment before I
mm,
truly let myself see the problems. It was kind of like
mm-hmm.
I had blinders on,
Mm-hmm.
kind of
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, I'm going to get out of this.
Mm-hmm.
And then
Mm-hmm.
once I finally got out, I was like, okay, that was bad.
Yeah, that was not good. Not, I
Yeah,
mean, nothing you said in there
right.
really sounded good.
But it's like you kind of just keep pushing through till you get there, and then
Mm-hmm.
and once you get where you're trying to go, you're like, okay, whew,
Yeah.
I made it.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. So true. I wanted to cheer. There's a section that you wrote. I really wanted to cheer when I read it. I was like reading the section about the psychological effects of growing up around alcohol. And you mentioned that it could cause children to take on unhealthy roles in relationships
Hmm.
and like scapegoating, rescuer, caregiver. I thought that was
Yeah.
really interesting. Can you share just some of those, like some experiences you had where you took on those roles or how that impacted how you went to
Right. I mean,
relationships?
totally. My whole beginning, as soon as I graduated high school, well, first my parents. I've always been the adult,
Yeah. Trying
and
to interview, rescue.
yeah, the whole 9 yards with them. So
Mm-hmm.
after them, when I entered my own life, we can just go straight into relationships. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
everybody always needed fixing.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody was there to care for me. It was like
Mm-hmm.
I found somebody else to care for or
Right.
provide for.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and then even my career choice, as a
Yeah.
nurse, I was like, oh, I'm gonna go be a nurse. I'm gonna take care of people.
Yeah. Yeah.
And so I think that was just kind of, I thought nursing's been great to me, so I'm
Yeah.
glad I picked that.
Yeah. Right.
But with the relationships and all, it really took, I mean, even being in them, I thought that was normal. Like
Right.
that I didn't
Right.
understand. Like my husband is a godsend. Thank
Mm-hmm.
God that God
There's
sent
so
him.
much protection in your story. That's the other thing. I kind of just see, like, I can see God's protection of you along the way,
Oh,
like
he,
so many times. It's
mhm.
like, wow.
Yeah,
It made me kind of worship a little bit while reading. So,
yes, yes. This was definitely God's doing for
yeah.
sure. So I mean,
So I want to go over that section because I want to geek out a little bit for people. And you did such a thorough job about like what all the different parts of the body that are affected with alcohol consumption. And so I'm just going to go through the list. I made a list from your book. It was like my textbook. What one point you made out, and I've seen this statistic a couple times, was that if you start drinking, the earlier you start drinking, the more likely you are to have an alcohol use disorder, which is the AUD is the name we give for alcoholism now. And I didn't realize it was like you gave an example of if you drink before 15, you're 5.6 times more likely of developing AUD than if you waited till after 21 years old.
mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean
That's,
that's a lot of times.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's a lot. I went straight to, my family's German. And, in Germany, it's kind of a joke, if you can reach the table, you can have a beer. So
Mm-hmm.
like kids can drink beer at 8 or 9 or 10,
Right.
you know?
Mm-hmm.
And it was like, oof, that's probably not so good. And you're a living example of the statistic. Like you
Mm-hmm.
first party getting wasted was 13 years old.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep. It's like an expectation of adulthood is what I thought.
Mm-hmm.
Like,
Woohoo, I've
okay, I'm
arrived. I'm
getting.
13. I'm an
Yeah.
adult.
Yes, I'm ready. Right.
Oh gosh. Can you
Right.
imagine thinking of your daughter?
Mm-hmm.
Can you imagine her 13 and thinking she's an adult? You're like,
No.
good, she's still a baby.
I can't, thinking of it like that. Oh my gosh. Like, what
Mm-hmm.
in the world?
Mm-hmm.
I'm just thankful. I'm
Yeah.
just thankful not to be drinking anymore.
Yeah. Amen.
Hallelujah.
Hallelujah. She won't experience that as a
Yes.
normal. So that's
Yes.
really good.
Yeah.
Yeah, I thought that I didn't realize for some reason, I think I just assumed there was a genetic component to alcoholism.
Yeah. Hmm.
But as you said, there's no gene for alcoholism.
Well, it's just not a gene. So
Right.
not a specific gene,
But
but
epigenetics is different.
yes.
You know?
And so that's crazy. It's because like they've done all these studies on a whole bunch of rats
Mm-hmm.
and they can't single out a gene
Mm-hmm.
that makes it link.
Mm-hmm.
But the rats, they one the heirs of the other rats are they become more easily addicted. And
That's
so they
epigenetics. Yeah.
yes,
So
yes.
epigenetics, is the way our environment influence our genetic predisposition. So the expression of certain genes. So though there's no gene for alcoholism, there are genes that affect our mood and our behavior. And
Hmm.
so like our environment. So for example, is known the first time I actually read a study about epigenetic influences, and it was in a psychology journal. And they talked about the fact that if a child was born to a father who had PTSD, so dad had PTSD, babies born to that father is more likely to have to commit suicide than a baby who's not born to
Hmm.
a father.
Yeah.
So there's this epigenetic. There's also habit
Right.
forming and conditioning, environment,
Yes.
obviously. So
Hmm.
that's like your story. It was your normal. It was
Yeah,
absolutely your normal.
for
You didn't
sure.
think twice about it.
Hmm.
Um, I saw you wrote excessive drinking is related to damaged brain functioning, including memory, learning, and mental disorders and cognitive decline. This podcast is about brain health, so that's a big one for me.
Yeah, I mean, I
you know.
feel like, yeah, every time you drink, it gets absorbed into your bloodstream
Mm-hmm.
and it circulates all over your whole body and it's a poison.
It's literally a poison.
Yeah, yeah,
It is
like
literally a poison.
yeah.
And if you Google it, there's studies that say it's all over it. If anybody goes on Google right now and they Google does drinking modestly, and there's definitions of what that is, improve brain health, there's actually studies that say yes, it prevents dementia. But what I thought was interesting about those studies was they were retrospective reviews of people and their average alcohol consumption. So it's not really a study that's kind of double-blind, placebo-controlled, like we are really controlling variables. And,
Right.
like there's a lot of backward looking. Plus, it's a generation. So when if you're looking back at 30 years of the past generations
Right.
alcohol consumption, these people had more robust genes than our population today. That's a reality.
Mm-hmm.
Like their genes are just slightly healthier
Mm-hmm.
than yours and mine,
Mm-hmm.
and God forbid the one that our children, it's
And
just a natural decline that we're seeing.
modestly.
What is modestly? Yeah, the definition of
Yeah,
that
I
is,
spent years convincing myself I was drinking modestly.
yeah. And I
So,
don't think people take time to really
right.
what's that
Yeah.
strictly defined as?
Mm-hmm.
And I don't think anybody that drinks daily is going to drink modestly, I'll
Right.
be honest.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
You said drinking can become addictive because it triggers the release of dopamine. All about dopamine. It's
Mm-hmm.
all about dopamine.
Yep.
That's our reward neurotransmitter. And that makes it hard to withdraw because you get
Mm-hmm.
this dopamine surge and
Right.
you want more of that. It's a pleasure. It's a neurotransmitter that makes us feel good, right? We get
Mm-hmm.
that actually high when you run, which is probably why you chose running to
Yes.
get off of alcohol.
Yes.
She gets that runner's high now. So we make our own dopamine again when we stop drinking, but it takes a period of time where you're deficient in
Mm-hmm.
dopamine, which can have physiological effects, which probably contributes to some of the seizures plus nutritional
Right.
deficiencies when
And so
people
that
withdraw.
helped me get through a lot, knowing just that simple fact. Because, like, imagine the mom that is quitting drinking,
Mm-hmm.
and her kid runs in
Mm-hmm.
to see her and is smiling, and the
Mm-hmm.
mom doesn't get happy. The
Mm-hmm.
mom's like, I'm miserable. Even
Mm-hmm.
though a normal person response would be happiness with the
Mm-hmm.
dopamine release to see their kid running at them.
Mm-hmm.
But the mom just quit drinking. So
Mm-hmm.
you're not going to feel the happiness.
So you feel more flat in that period where
Yeah,
you're kind of
you're
flat,
sad, you're like, you don't have, you know,
the normal,
the normal reaction to like a simple
what should be
daily thing.
pleasurable
Yeah,
should be
somebody
pleasurable.
makes a joke and you're supposed to
Mm-hmm.
laugh at it and like think
Mm-hmm.
it's funny. No, nothing's funny. You're just
Mm-hmm.
like, life, there's no life. Like,
Mm-hmm.
why am I living this life? You know?
That's a really good statement.
Hmm.
Like it's a life stealer. I mean,
Yeah,
like,
it really, yeah. Initially, the
yeah,
initial
when
quitting,
you quit, yeah.
when you quit, you just have to, go in knowing that
Mm-hmm.
those emotions, you're not gonna have any of that
Mm-hmm.
initially. You got to earn that back. Like your brain
Mm-hmm.
has to
Has
get
to
that.
rebalance.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And it
Yeah.
is literally true chemical rebalancing.
Mhm. And so that's not you being weak or
Nope.
that's just your brain was conditioned to
Mm-hmm.
think that.
Did you have a lot of brain fog? Because I know that
Mhm.
that dopamine can affect not
you
just,
know,
it can affect mood, learning,
Brain
and
fog, that would be a great way of putting it.
thinking clearly.
I was just like,
Just going
Lord,
through the motions of
yes.
life. Yeah.
Yeah, I was just trying to figure it out. So that's why I kind of buried myself like in the research part of it.
Uh-huh. Uh-huh.
And like, I just stayed determined on that. Like,
Uh-huh.
not drinking became my number one goal. And I was
Uh-huh.
like, I
Uh-huh.
don't care how I feel.
You're right. Yeah. Right.
So that's.
Um, Alcohol, one thing that you mentioned was alcohol disrupts the balance of
Mhm.
your hypothalamic pituitary. So we have this beautiful thing that we all in school. I don't know about you. The first time I was introduced to that was in PA school, and then again in anesthesia school. But it's our homeostasis mechanism, right? Our hypothalamic pituitary adrenal axis. And you said alcohol disrupts the balance of the hypothalamus and the pituitary, so their connection, their ability to communicate, which has a wide range of endocrine problem, effects. Like it affects everything. Your hypothalamus also stimulates the release of thyroid hormones, so it can affect your sex drive, your metabolic function, your thyroid, all those things. I thought that was really helpful. And then one thing you said that I don't know that I knew this, because my response to alcohol when I drink, this one I love drinking, is it makes me hot. I get like a hot flash when I drink alcohol. I've always had that response. My face gets red and I just get a hot flash. It's kind of crazy. But you said that the temperature regulation, you actually get drop temperatures, like your brain's ability to regulate temperatures goes down, so you actually get cool. Your core gets cool.
Right.
That was crazy to me.
Yeah, I think that's when you overindulge. I don't know if you overindulge often.
Not really.
Yeah, so yeah.
I just get a hot flash and I'm like, okay, this is not fun anymore.
Yeah. You're like, I'm done.
Yes. You said that, alcohol damages the hippocampus, and that results in a lot of memory loss, which is the connection to, that's the part of the brain that gets damaged and heavily damaged in dementia related illnesses. So I thought that was relevant to mention.
Right.
And then we talked about how the brain volume shrinks. You mentioned that. But you also gave people hope, because I don't want people to go, oh my gosh, they're taking away my alcohol, and taking away all my fun, and this is just not fun. There is a hope that, if you have been drinking a while and you do stop, that there is hope that your brain can rebuild some of what it's lost, so the neurons can rebuild.
Right. Yeah, our brains are so smart. Like, there's some people that have like complete brain damage on one side, and then they're able to learn to function with one side. So like, you can, let's say you had to go to rehab a bunch of times and you finally can kick the habit. I mean, your brain can rebuild, like that's the best thing about this, is like you don't have to continue down that path. So that's exciting. That's hope.
It is hope. That's exactly right. The other thing you mentioned is that alcohol causes nutritional deficiencies that lead to dilated cardiomyopathy, which is a big deal. Irregular heartbeats, elevated blood pressure. I think that's a lot of things affecting that. The cardiovascular system's damaged. Alcohol always really causes a release of cortisol, because it's a stressor to the body, and the body responds in turn by releasing cortisol.
Do you know what I think is ironic? People always drink alcohol when they're depressed. They're like,
I know, like, and it's a depressant.
And it's a depressant. Like, what are we doing?
That doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, like, what are we doing?
That's so funny. You mentioned that alcohol has an effect on the stomach, and if you and I, we do anesthesia, and we'll do GI anesthesia, and on the weekends or emergencies, the people that we see are the people who are drinking with gastritis and bleeding ulcers, and that's who I see. If it's a weekend, that's the person I'm seeing. So it does cause disruption of your gut. It causes more acid to be released.
Well, so a lot of alcoholics end up dying from a GI bleed. So like you think it's the liver failure or something like that, the pancreatitis. A lot of them is the GI bleed gets them.
That's incredible.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
Because you don't hear about that. You're like, oh.
One point that's really important, and this is just because, in holistic health, I'm always looking at the gut, and there are some really clear findings that you'll see when I do a stool study and I look at the gut. But one thing we always think about liver when it comes to alcohol. We know it causes cirrhosis. It's well known. Everybody knows that, I think, right? It causes cirrhosis. Long-term chronic alcohol abuse does. But the number one cause of cirrhosis today is actually fatty liver that is non-alcoholic from diet and other toxicity. But the alcohol consumption actually doesn't just affect the liver. It also affects the microflora of your gut. So it actually damages the gut biotic, like the gut flora, the gut bacteria. And so that's what predisposes you to getting a peptic ulcer or becoming hyperacidic with your, having more reflux and things like that. So there's a damage to the gut bacteria and the liver function, and that's just a
Mm-hmm.
perfect storm of
I mean,
horrible.
yeah, it's a
If the
mess.
brain starts in the gut, we're wrecking the gut,
Yeah.
So that's not good stuff.
Right.
You mentioned the alcohol. Obviously, it causes damage to the pancreas, but I liked how you went into some of the details. You said that it causes a release of less digestive enzymes.
Mm-hmm.
That's not exactly what I would have thought, but that leads to further nutritional deficiencies, because if you don't
Mm-hmm.
make enzymes and release enzymes into your digestive system in response to food, you can't break down your food, and you
Right.
can't get the nutrients out of your food.
Mm-hmm.
So that was interesting. And of course, we know alcohol is a carcinogen. It's a human
I
carcinogen.
mean, why don't we talk about that
That's
all the
huge.
time?
It's a documented human carcinogen.
Yeah, I'm like, I feel like that should be everywhere, all over the bottles. Like, this causes cancer.
Mm-hmm.
How
The
about those
range.
things you buy from California? Like,
Yeah.
just everything you buy from California, it says this
Yeah.
little toy can cause cancer.
Yeah.
I'm like, we put it on all the toys, but like
Yeah.
we're not posting it up on all the alcohol slogans.
Right. That was really interesting. The statistic you put is 4% increase in breast cancer, but there's actually
That's
a
for light drinking, yeah.
light drinking, and then
Yeah.
moderate drinking is 23% increase in breast cancer, and
Mm-hmm.
heavy drinking, holy cow, 60% increase in breast cancer. That's insane. If we're
Yeah.
going to wear pink on our shirts in October, isn't it October Breast Cancer Awareness
Mm-hmm.
Month? If we're going to do that, we need to talk about alcohol and
Right,
breast
because
cancer.
all this 60% increase, I mean, it's
That's
like
huge.
saying you're going to get breast cancer,
Right. Yeah. That's
right?
that's that's more
But
than 50%. It's
yeah,
insane.
like,
And
yeah,
I
so.
I loved that you mentioned the Lancet study that said the only true safe level of drinking alcohol is 0.
Hmm. That's the
that
truth.
that's huge. You
Like,
put
even, let's even mention, like, some people don't drink a lot. Let's say binge drinking. I mean,
right.
a night of binge drinking, you're looking at, you know, getting hurt or being stupid and
Mm-hmm.
getting in the car and driving, or over
Mm-hmm.
drinking and hitting your head. I mean,
So
just
many things.
simple one time, or making a bad mistake and
Mm-hmm.
ruining your relationship, your marriage. Like,
Mm-hmm.
only true amount of alcohol that is safe to drink is 0.
Mm-hmm. I think of when you were saying that, I was thinking about those Murdaugh mystery, the Murdaugh
Yeah.
murders. Oh my gosh, I
Uh-huh.
can't even say it's weird, hard to say. That got the storyline of that starts with the kid, the boy, the one that was killed, um, being indicted in a negligent homicide, or being brought to trial on negligent homicide because of a girl falling out of a boat that he was driving while intoxicated. And the
Right.
storyline is really interesting, because they say, everybody on the boat was trying to get him to not drink, not drive, not
Right.
drive the boat. They were literally fighting him to
Right.
get him off the steering wheel. And he
Hmm.
was so inhibited
Hmm.
that he fought to
Hmm.
drive the
Right.
boat while drunk, and then hit a
It's
pile of
like,
fish, and somebody
anybody
died.
else could have drove, but
Right.
he's like, I gotta drive.
Mm-hmm. So, like,
Yeah.
it's just incredible. So,
Hmm.
yeah, he really put to task the whole talk about, wine. He said, I think we just say, whoever went through the trouble to convince us that wine is good for us due to the antioxidants probably drinks way too much wine.
I mean, really, like,
Yeah.
is that necessary
Yeah.
to tell me that?
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah.
that's what I told myself.
Oh,
I was
yeah.
the one that would bring that statement up at the
Yeah.
parties.
Yeah.
I'd be like, "Oh, wine's good for me," or what?
Yeah.
And it's
There
because
was
I drink too much of
That's
wine.
right. Exactly. Well, it's supposed to be the resveratrols, and it's strictly red wine that's associated with, which some people maybe not know, may
Right,
not know, because
right.
that's where the resveratrols are. They're in the red wine, in the red grapes. But the reality is, to get the actual amount of resveratrol that will have antioxidant and brain protective effects from wine, you'd have to drink so much wine that it would be counterproductive. Do you see what I'm saying? Like the poison would the harm would outweigh the benefits.
Right.
So it's a really good point. I mean, all this kind of leaves you thinking, like, really, is it worth it? Is it worth drinking? I mean, we're in a culture that seems to be waking up a little bit to toxins in our food, even in our beauty products and our clothes, even our homes, our environments, and people are kind of waking up a little bit. And it's a culture that seems to understand that healthy detoxification of the body is important. But yeah, we still kind of want to hang on to alcohol. So I think that's kind of funny.
I wanted to mention what I had told you last time, just because I think it really hits home for me. When people quit smoking, we always say, "Oh, congratulations!" Like, "Oh, I'm so proud of you. Way to go for quitting smoking." And then when you tell somebody, "Oh, I decided to quit drinking," they say, "Oh, why? Why?"
Yes.
Why? Oh, what made you do that? Or why would you do that? And I'm like, that is total opposite. Like,
where's the celebration?
Yeah. Like, I want somebody to be like, congratulations.
Exactly. Exactly. That's so true. It's exactly true. It's like you have to defend yourself. You're already put in a place of, and I think that's probably, I think you mentioned that was kind of hard for you to be ready for those conversations. That those were hard conversations at first when you quit drinking.
Yeah, those were super hard because I was I had that fight going on in my mind too.
Sure, right.
So anytime anybody would be like, "Why?"
They'd say what you were thinking.
Yeah, I'm like, I know.
Yeah, I don't know.
I'm like, why? Like, why am I doing this?
That's so funny. Well, I really appreciate, like I said, I really appreciate that you got really vulnerable. I think like I said, it had so many areas in that book that related to people who had addiction of any sort. I mean, and running away of any sort, like emotional baggage even. I mean, there's just so much, and even dealing with mindset. There was a lot of nuggets I got from your book, and I thought was really good. So I hope everybody goes and gets that book and reads it. It's worth the effort. You have any closing thoughts you want to leave everybody with?
Well, just my main concern is that to self-evaluate. I'm not telling everybody that they have to go quit drinking and not have a beer at the football game or whatever. I'm just saying to start, looking at your consumption and know that, try to figure out if it's too much, and if you're going to alcohol for emotional reasons, or if you're trying to dull out anything. Because that's where you get in trouble when you start getting in the habit of drinking and using drinking for a way of coping with your
life,
how you feel in life. Then you could be getting in trouble. And it's better to catch this early than later. So
100%, like you said. Was it 30 to 42
year old? 35 to 42 is the death went up 40% for women.
It's just insane. So this is a women's health issue. So women, pay attention, and men, if you love your women, pay attention. That's right. It's also an issue for men, but
it's not mommy juice.
It's not mommy juice. Well, thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me, Amanda. I really appreciate it, and I think this is going to be very valuable for everyone. And I hope that a lot of people took some encouragement away and are motivated in the right direction to advocate for their health in this way.
That's right. Thank you for having me.
All right. Talk to you soon.
All right, bye.
Okay, guys. So, how about that content? I hope that you feel smarter. I hope that you feel more empowered. I hope that you feel validated. I hope you feel like there was information in that podcast that was resonating with you, relevant to your health struggle. Goodness gracious, that's going to drive me crazy. Okay. But I promised that I would talk to you guys about, some of the things I do to support my body if and when the occasional drink is needed or desired or whatnot. Of course, it doesn't happen very often, but when I drink, I also do a lot of things to support my body. It's like anything. If you'll hear that resonate or you'll hear that theme, I guess is what I'm trying to say, kind of throughout my podcast. So, if I'm in the hospital all day for 3 days in a row, I know I've been exposed to poor light, lots of radiation, EMF, and oh my gosh, the cleaning, you guys, the cleaning, the cleaning products they use are wow. Okay. So what am I going to do? I'm going to do things to aggressively enhance my detoxification, maybe bind up some of those toxins, maybe support my gut in other ways, maybe get an infrared sauna. I'm going to be a little bit more aggressive about actively detoxifying my body, getting some extra sunlight, getting my feet on the ground. Same thing if I'm going to expose myself to alcohol. Let's be honest. It is a poison. It is what it is. Okay. If we enjoy it, that's fine. But there's going to be physiological side effects from it, right? So to mitigate that, what can we do? There are a couple things that I like to do. There are two major organs that are acutely affected, like meaning when you drink, these two organs take the hit right away. And the first one, of course, is your liver. If you're a person, okay, I'm going to bring in a little bit of Ayurveda into this conversation because that actually matters how we approach supporting our body. Okay. If the liver is a source of a lot of emotion, and if you have a lot of heat in your liver, your body is going to have a certain response to things that heat you up. So, and I'm just going to give this very, very brief because I don't want to spend a long time on Ayurveda, but a person with who tends to be run very hot, they don't do well with spicy foods. Those people tend to have a lot of liver heat as well. And so how I approach that person might be a little different than how I approach the person who does not have that same problem, who has a different kind of Ayurvedic disposition. There are three main ones. And that's all I'm going to say. I tend to run hot, so I'm going to give you what I do because I want to stay within the bounds of what's legal. But I tend to be a hot-natured person, and I have that Ayurvedic disposition that has a lot of heat. So when I support my body in a circumstance where heat is driven up in my liver, I'm working to bring that heat down. I'm working on cooling things. So for example, the essential oils I might grab for me would be oils that cool my body. And where do I put them? I put them over my liver. So I may do like some spearmint, maybe some peppermint. There are some of the wood oils, cypress oils, things like that, and put them over my liver. I always use cilantro oil topically in those circumstances, and maybe internally if you have the right type of essential oil. So that would be something that I would do. Cilantro is also very cooling. Basil is also very cooling. So that would be something I would use as well. So if we're talking about essential oils, if I have drunk alcohol and I'm feeling sluggish the next day, I'm going to use basil over my adrenals. I'm going to use cilantro on my liver. I'm going to use some spearmint and peppermint on my liver. I may grab something called N-acetylcysteine, or NAC. Is a supplement. Okay, and I'm not going to give you doses because I don't want to, again, I've got to stay within the boundaries of what's legal, I think. But N-acetylcysteine is really powerful to support the liver. It is used in Tylenol overdose because what it does is it provides a precursor cysteine, which is necessary for the production of glutathione. So it boosts your liver stores of glutathione and the release of glutathione from the liver. And as alongside that, it basically on its own will bind toxins, NAC will. So that is sometimes something that's helpful to supplement the next day to sort of support your body's recovery from being exposed to, a little alcohol. And then the other thing that I will do is the liver is the first thing that gets injured, and the gut is the second thing. So both of those take a hit on the acute level when you drink alcohol, even just a glass of wine a night. So what I do with that, again, in the Ayurvedic tradition, my disposition doesn't do well with fermented foods, but yours may. Fermented foods are a great thing to drink on the next day if that's your disposition. They provide a ton of bacteria to the gut that will help support and recover from that damage that you've just done to them. So a little bit of probiotic culture from that. You can drink some probiotic kefir. You can up that dose. If you're already taking probiotics, sometimes you might just want to bump that up, maybe take a higher dose probiotic. And yes, I will put some links in the show notes of my favorite probiotics that I would use in this circumstance. There's some that I use daily. So yes, you can take a probiotic, a very well-balanced probiotic, and a higher dose of it for about 24 to 48 hours after drinking. So number one, essential oils for cooling the liver. If you're like me and you run hot, I would probably suggest cilantro is good for any Ayurvedic tradition. So if you're any type of person, a cool person, a hot person, in between person, you'll do fine with cilantro over your liver as an essential oil after drinking, and juniper berry over your kidneys, and basil over your kidneys, because that's where your adrenals are. And they need a little bit of support because you just stress them out. And then number two would be your N-acetylcysteine to support your liver. And if you have binders, I would take those as well. Which ones, that just depends on you. Just make sure you're pooping. And number three, of course, last but not least, would be the increasing probiotics in your gut. Cultured kefir and kimchi and fermented foods, or just a higher dose of a probiotic, a good well-rounded probiotic. That's how I would take care of my body. That's how I would support my body when drinking. Hope that helps. Talk to you soon. For the next 6 months, as we try to get the word out there about this podcast content, we are offering a very special promotion. We will be doing a drawing to give away a free MRT food sensitivity test, which samples the top 88 common food sensitivities. This test has a value of $399, and we will be giving it away for free. MRT is the most advanced and reliable test for hidden inflammatory reactions to foods and food chemicals, and it identifies your best foods. So this is not an allergen test, this is a food sensitivity test. This helps you when you identify your best foods and all those hidden inflammatory reaction. It helps you make a strategic food plan in order to rapidly reduce systemic and digestive inflammation, which improves outcomes of any other digestive health program that you're currently participating in. This is something I do for a lot of my clients in order to rapidly get ahead of the inflammation that they're dealing with. For more information about the test, please go to our website, beyondbrainhealth.com, and check out the Direct to You labs. We'll also provide a link for you in the show notes, so you can check that out as well if that's an easier direction for you. But as I said above, I am excited to offer this test, this $399 test to you for free. Here's how you qualify to get it for free, okay? So I'm going to warn you, since this test is almost $400, there are a few steps you must follow to qualify for this drawing. Okay, it's a $400 test, so it's not just one step, you guys. So here we go. go to your show notes on whatever podcaster you're listening on, whether it's Google, Apple, or Spotify. Give us a rating, good or bad. I appreciate both. And comment on the podcast. I really appreciate the honest feedback, especially as I'm growing and learning this whole podcasting education process. I want you guys to really enjoy our time together, so let me know how I'm doing. All right, step number two, you will also follow us on Instagram or Facebook, please, and give us a comment there as well. Those links should also be found on every single episode of our show notes. So you just need to open the show notes that you're listening on right now and, click the link to your Instagram or Facebook, whichever you guys prefer, social media platform that you prefer to be on, and follow us there and give us a comment. And lastly, to qualify for the drawing, please share this podcast with at least one person. Okay, so to sum up, you're giving us a rating on your favorite podcaster, whichever one you prefer. You're going to follow us on the podcast and on Instagram or Facebook, whichever you're on, and give us a comment on both. And lastly, you're going to share this content with at least one person. That's a few steps, but it shouldn't take you more than 60 seconds to complete all three. We will be doing the drawing on December 15th, 2023. So let's get the word out there. My hope is that this podcast has left you with a few new insights, hopefully some encouragement, and most importantly, some actionable steps forward toward healing your body and your brain. If you found this content helpful, please don't forget to give us a like and share it with someone else who might benefit from it. Also, don't forget to follow us on our Instagram and Facebook pages. I love hearing from you guys. I look forward to spending some time with you again soon. So until then, celebrate the small victories. There really is hope for lasting healing.